for a battery car. Okay. Yeah. Tell me why I'm going to buy the air. There's one big difference. Tell me. Other than the price. Tell me. I'll tell you. The difference is, if there's a compressor at a gas station, just like you fill up your tires, you can fill up your cost and cost. 10,000. 10,000 for the car costs $10,000. The car costs 10,000. That's it. That's it. Something's wrong here. No, because it's very simply made. It's better. You may know the name Guy Negre. Yeah, that's the guy who developed the this guy came for a lighter motor. He's got 150 of patents. He knows he's a real car guy. He loves cars. Right. What would it cost for you to bring a car here? Manufacture here, I thought. We're going to manufacture it in Hawaii. We're going to manufacture it in Hawaii. $5 million for a plant, to build regional plant, to build the cars. Why Hawaii? Hawaii is a sort of enclosed community where they have pollution problems, they have high cost of gas, and it's more of a controlled place. Part of the concept of the company is not a big Detroit type plant. It is regional plants, small plants building cars for that area.
Okay. Can you share what it's made out of?
Fiberglass, polyurethane, and resin. You can jump on the door, and it won't bend like regular cars.
What about in a crash test?
So we can't pass a crash test until we crash a car, and we don't want to crash a prototype. We only have 3 prototypes, so we would be crashing, testing a car that was built from scratch. $5 million to build a factory in Hawaii, and you have to market it, right? And not only do you have to let people know.
That's why she's in one of those engines. Neosporin plus pain relief starts relieving pain faster and kills more types of infectious bacteria. Neosporin plus pain relief kills the germs that fight the pain. Use a family brand.
When I lay in my Tempur-Pedic contour and I slowly feel it start to kind of wrap itself around me, my mind is kind of buzzing. And the next thing I know, it's morning.
With Tempur-Flex, you got the spring and mass of a traditional mattress, and also adjusts my body.
My couch feels so comfortable. It feels like somebody's hugging you. How can the bed do that?
This is the best investment of your life because this one dreams are made.
There's a Tempur-Pedic for everyone. Find the feel that's right for you. Allergy medicine not working? Try Nasacort. It relieves the worst nasal allergy symptoms, even congestion. Plus, it's non-addictive, scent and alcohol-free, and has no harsh taste. For 24-hour relief, Nasacort stops more of what makes you miserable. Introducing McDonald's Crispy and Cool Deal. Purchase any buttermilk crispy chicken item and cool off with a free medium soft drink on us. This Friday through Sunday. That's one crispy and cool deal. Buttermilk.
A distribution deal with the people who own it. So I'm giving you $5 million for 50% contingent on being able to negotiate an American-wide deal.
And if you don't get that deal,
What's contingent on that?
then it's the $5 million goes away.
Guy Neg would be thrilled to have you make a deal with him. And I feel very certain that that number could come down. Because ultimately, having the U.S. rights is the golden goose.
Why are you even hesitating?
Well, I want to add one other Philip that you would be purchasing, and that is the golf cart.
You have to talk yourself out of a deal.
You got to make a decision. I love cars. When you're dealing with the reinvention of the motor, that leap of faith is the belief that people who are on the ground floor have to take. And we've been proven right for taking the jump.
High five, Robert. Awesome.
Something there? I hope there is. Earlier this season, we saw Chef Heidi Loving make a deal with Lori Bernier for her vegan cheese company, Heidi Hall.
We're currently available in 4 regions of Whole Foods Market delicious plant-based cheeses. I like to try some cheese. You know what's great about Heidi? She's socially conscious, she's hardworking, she's so tenacious, and the product is amazing. She makes it with love. I'm so glad that we got into over 300 Whole Food stores like that. It's really not easy. Oh, and you're doing amazing. Together, I know we will become the next big name in natural food. I'm gonna trust you. I'll answer you now.
My name's James. He's the one we picked for James for.
Kristen, but when you return to the United States of Pirates.
Rated PG. Peter. The NBC team takes a closer look at concussions in high school athletes. Are new state safety programs doing enough? Our surprising discovery when we asked how often these concussions happen. Tuesday at 10 only on ABC 7 Eyewitness News. Not so long ago, on a street just around the corner, the force was strong between father and son.
You got it?
We come by.
Looks like you want happy days.
Of course, that's today. Is passed on to a new generation.
You want this?
And the circle is now complete. Walmart has always been the best place in the galaxy to get everyday low prices on Star Wars.
Square, texture's broken, which means no like waffles. Something smells delicious. I got my angle breakfast sandwich. It's sweet, it's savory, it's in your microwave.
With Straight Talk Wireless, you get the same phone, same 4G LTE networks for half the cost. Of course, if that's too straightforward for you, try this.
Are you ready to cut your phone bill in half?
Put on the mascot.
Put your helmet on. Hey, get out here and save some money, baby! Get on America's largest and most dependable networks with the LG Sunset.
Today's gospel is really one of my favorite stories where Jesus meets a deaf person. And when I read this, it made me think of upstate New York in the Adirondack Mountains. There is a camp called Camp Mark 7. It's a deaf Catholic camp. It was set up in the 1980s by a deaf priest of the name Tom Coughlin. There were also many deaf Catholic members that helped him set up Camp Mark 7. You may be wondering why they called it Camp Mark 7. Why that specific name? Well, if we look at today's story from the Gospel, we notice that it comes from the book of Mark. And if we look further, we notice it's from chapter 7. Thus the name Camp Mark 7. Camp Mark 7 was set up with a specific purpose and goal in mind. Father Coughlin and many of the deaf Catholic community members noticed that there are many deaf children, many deaf adults who tend to live in isolation and live far from each other, and who also have a very difficult time assimilating into the hearing world and communicating with hearing people. They also don't have an opportunity to learn about their Catholic faith. In today's gospel, we see a deaf person who could not communicate with hearing people because back then they probably didn't even have a sign language for the deaf. Deaf people were alone and isolated and not very connected to communities of people. And because this deaf person had no communication, they didn't have an understanding of God. Jesus met with this deaf person, opened them up, and allowed them to be able to communicate and understand God. Camp Mark 7 does the same thing. It gathers deaf people and deaf children from all over so they aren't isolated and so they can come together and learn about their Catholic faith. And I think it's possible that today's gospel inspires us to be more willing and welcoming of deaf and hearing people who are isolated, to help them feel part of a community. But also we need to support them in their faith so that they can understand how God loves them. Thank you, and God bless.